Welcome back, everybody. First things first, you'll notice that my voice sounds a bit different, and for that I apologise. I have decided to record the next three lectures uh, at the end of my recording. So these are the following three lectures that are coming up. I recorded these last, but unfortunately, my microphone has decided to kind of call it quits, so to speak. So I'm stuck with my laptop microphone. I hope that it's clear enough. I think that it is clear enough, and I do apologize for the slight drop in quality, but this will just be for the next three lectures. And for the next three lectures, we're going to be looking at guided demonstrations. But instead of just looking at one guided demonstration, which I look at in my other video courses, we're going to look at three guided demonstrations for each of the three letter tones. For the informal, for the semi-formal, and for the formal. As you can see in the subtitle here, we'll be starting with an informal task 1 letter from start to finish. So let's get started. So this is the question that we're going to work on in this guided demonstration. And so I want you to look at this question here. We'll read it out together and then we'll think about the planning process. And remember that planning process that we talked about in section 2. We're going to apply all of these steps as we go through this question. So, you recently received a letter from a friend asking for advice about whether to go to college or to try to get a job. You think he or she should get a job. Write a letter to this friend. In your letter, say why he or she would not enjoy going to college, explain why getting a job is a good idea for him or her, and suggest types of job that would be suitable for him or her. Now, the first thing that we want to do when planning our response in task 1, hopefully you remember, is we want to identify some key words. But before we even do that, I think it's a good idea to just identify the type of letter that we're writing and the purpose of the letter that we're writing. And we'll include that in our notes over here in this yellow box. So first of all, see if you can identify the type, those three types of letter. Which one do you think this is? Hopefully it's pretty clear to you that we're dealing with an informal letter. We can see words like friend, for example, seems pretty clear. And the purpose of the letter, you can see one of the words there in the task itself, the word advice. So we're going to go with advice. And now we'll return to the task itself and see if we can highlight some of these key words. We've already talked about a couple of them. So we have a letter from a friend. You may even feel like it's a good idea to highlight the word recently. It may be relevant for your letter. Maybe you wouldn't talk about things that happened a long time ago, as it wouldn't be relevant. And we have advice, as we just mentioned. That's going to be the purpose of this letter. About whether to go to college. So I'm going to write whether because this is a choice between two things. So college or to try to get a job. Now that I'm highlighting that whole section rather than just job, because it's not a case of choosing between college or a job. The job is not being offered, and that's an important distinction to make. So it's attempting to get a job, whereas go to college is the other choice. And we think that he or she, depending on the friend obviously, should get a job. So we're going to highlight that all here. Should get a job. You see that should, that modal verb, that's typically used for giving advice. Then we have the particular bullet point directives below. Write a letter to this friend. That's pretty clear. I don't think we need to highlight that. In your letter, say why he or she would not enjoy going to college. So would not enjoy, I'm going to highlight these in two separate parts here, going to college. So why they would not enjoy going to college. We don't think it's a good idea. Explain why getting a job is a good idea. And suggest types of job that would be suitable. I would also go for that as well. So we'll have to think about their particular characters, their particular skills, their particular strengths and weaknesses and things like that. Okay, so that's what we've got. That's our highlighted keywords. Now we can return to the plan, and hopefully you remember the next part of the planning process, and that is to come up with a couple of ideas for each of the bullet point directives, as each of those bullet points is going to help us to create each individual paragraph in the letter. Remember, we first of all present a purpose sentence that kind of composes the first paragraph. After that, we move on to the real content of the letter. So we're going to start with a paragraph 2 and think about 2 points here. So, why he or she would not enjoy going to college? Well, let's have a think about this. And actually, the first thing I want to do is recommend that they don't go. So I want to make it clear that I don't think it's a good idea first, and then explain why it wouldn't be a good idea, why they wouldn't enjoy it. So I'm going to use a nice phrasal verb here, hold off. We think we should hold off on college. We don't think they shouldn't go altogether maybe, but just not right now. So hold off on college. For the time being, we could also use a nice expression there, the time being. Again, we're trying to just include some vocabulary that can help us with this vocabulary lexical resource score. And I think that the issue with enjoyment is going to come through a financial problem, because maybe this person doesn't have really enough money to make it work for them. So we can talk about, again, specific topic related vocabulary here. We're looking at education, we're looking at college, we'll look at tuition costs, and we'll put in a very informal adjective here. Crazy tuition costs. Crazy meaning excessive. Obviously, we use it to talk about madness. And difficult to afford. Really high tuition costs, really. Okay, so we've got those 2 points there. Obviously, we'll have to develop those ideas in a moment, but I have confidence that we can do that. We'll move on to the third paragraph, which is looking at the second bullet point. Explain why getting a job is a good idea for him or her. So I think returning to that theme from earlier, which also improves that coherence and cohesion, we can again talk about finance. So we'll talk about saving. So getting a job allows you to save. So let's say get a job allows you to save. I might not actually use this language later, just putting down some ideas. That's the important thing. Get the ideas on the page as quickly as you can. And as I said, we want to come up with 2 ideas for each bullet point. So what else could we say here? Well, let's follow on. Let's follow on with the same idea. If you save money, then you can go to college afterwards. So you can save for college, and everything's coming together now. The whole letter meets the themes of the task, so nothing's out of place. Okay, now let's move to the last one. Suggest types of job that would be suitable for him or her. So first of all, we want to suggest maybe that we know what they like, what they don't like. I'm imagining this person here, this friend of mine, really likes the outdoors. So likes the outdoors. So as a result, what kind of job might they like? Maybe something in agriculture, maybe something in conservation, maybe something in sports coaching, something like that. And then maybe we can reference something that they did in the past that helped them to be suitable for this job. Maybe they took a training course or something. And again, words like training course, very nice. Compound noun that fits the theme of the task, about work, about college. Okay, and then we would close off with a little sentence at the end being like, I hope this has been helpful, etc. And I hope to hear back from you soon. Whatever is appropriate for the informal letter that we're in, but we'll come to that later. We shouldn't need to plan that. So that's our plan, and we're going to just leave that on the screen here, and we're going to move into the actual writing itself. We're going to start with a nice simple Dear John. So we're going with a he and a him response here. And remember, the first sentence in a letter should be the purpose sentence, but when we're in an informal letter, we can just open with something more casual. It would sound a bit strange to write, I am writing to give you advice, etc. That sounds a little bit stuffy, a little bit formal. So we want to just make a very casual opening, imagine that maybe this person has just moved, that's why they're wondering whether to go to college or get a job. So we're going to say something like, now, notice a couple of things here. Number one, the punctuation. There are 2 punctuation marks that indicate that we're in an informal letter. What are they? Hopefully you see we've got that contraction, we've got the apostrophe, you are, your, and we have the exclamation mark at the end presenting this very friendly tone. We're in an intimate sort of friendship with this other person, really comfortable with them. The other thing that I want you to think about as well is some of the very informal language. Getting on okay just means I hope you are okay, really, in London. But getting on okay, just doing okay, essentially. It's just a little bit more informal. And also notice the omission of the first person pronoun I. Again, we can do that because we're in an informal letter. Not I hope, just hope. And that's okay. You can actually just move forward from this paragraph now. So the informal letter is a little bit different to the other types of letter in that we don't really need that purpose sentence to open things up, but we can just move and transition quite naturally in a moment into the next paragraph where, although we won't maybe write I am writing to do this, we'll make a very clear reference to the reason that we're writing. And in this case, it's because we received a letter from a friend. We'll make that very clear from the opening. So I'm going to write, it sounds like you're having a tough time deciding on this college issue. Okay, so we make that clear reference to the letter that we recently received. That way, we don't have to sound all stuffy and formal, saying, I am writing to get back to you, I am writing to respond, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't sound right here. So we don't want to make explicit reference to that letter, but everything in an informal letter is a little bit more indirect because there's just this mutual understanding a lot of the time. So it sounds like you're having a tough time, nice informal vocabulary there, a tough time. Again, another contraction, you're, and deciding on this college issue. Notice this nice use of the demonstrative pronoun this. Again, it's like this mutual understanding. You both know what you're talking about. Now, I'm sorry to dwell on this point. I won't spend too much longer on it. But if you are just writing fresh to a friend, you didn't receive a letter, but you're just writing to them for another reason, then you can, of course, write I'm writing to, but do again keep it informal. Do not write I am writing to. Usually what I would write is just writing to. Again, remove that first person pronoun. Even remove the to be verb. So just writing. Just writing to ask whether, just writing to let you know that, just writing to update you on, just writing to say thanks for. Now let's have a look at our plan here. We have hold off for the time being. So I want to include both of those bits of vocabulary, but I also want to think back to the vocabulary from the earlier lectures, from that advice part of the informal vocabulary lecture. One of the great things that we can do in an advice letter is include a conditional, so mixing up the vocabulary with the grammar. So I can do this. First of all, I want to introduce it a little bit. We're going to sympathize with our friend. It's a difficult choice, I know. It's a difficult choice, I know. Now here we go. But if, see if you can remember what this goes like. If I was you, is it was you? No, it's were you. If I were you, common mistake to write was, but if I were you, I will, I would, what do you think? Hopefully you're going with I would, except here we can contract again. If I were you, I'd, and then we'll bring this in. Some nice informal vocabulary again, on the studies, rather on college, nice colloquial vocabulary, on the studies for the time being. Now we move to our other point. We have this crazy tuition costs, and we come back to this idea of not enjoy. We need to make explicit reference to that part of the task. So let's say with the crazy cost of tuition, we could just say tuition cost, but cost of tuition is also fine. With the crazy cost of tuition here, we're thinking London, England in general, very expensive place to study these days. With the crazy cost of tuition here, and now we're thinking they don't have a job, so little time left over to work, because it would have to be part-time, they probably wouldn't be able to work full-time. I feel, so instead of this, I would argue, I advise, just I feel, again, keep it kind of nice and light and natural. I feel you might, let's say, let's go for the verb struggle. You might struggle, not you will struggle, but you might struggle. You don't want to be too forceful. You might struggle to, now here's a really nice expression, nice and informal, although it could be used in a formal setting as well. See if you know what I'm going to go for here. Make ends, some of you will know, meet. Make ends meet, which basically means having enough money to survive, essentially. You might struggle to make ends meet. Okay, I'm just going to finish this with something nice and informal. Again, we got this punctuation, the contraction, would not, wouldn't, and the exclamation mark at the end. Again, trying to bring in a little bit of joviality. It's quite a serious message that we're trying to communicate here, so we kind of lighten it at the end with that exclamation mark. And that wouldn't be any fun. You know, we just got that jokey line at the end there. And notice that we're starting this sentence with a conjunction. We would not usually do that in a formal setting, or even probably in a semi-formal setting, but you can do that in an informal setting. So that's the end of the first main paragraph. We've covered, we might want to just go back and look at those keywords that we've highlighted again. I think we've covered the directives here. Once you're comfortable that you've done that, you can move on to the next paragraph. So let's keep going. We're looking at paragraph 3 and the second bullet point directive, why getting a job is a good idea. And we have these notes over here. Now again, I want to come back to that informal advice vocabulary from the previous lecture. Here's what I would do. Okay, and we can even bring in some more punctuation here, a colon. I wouldn't recommend doing that if you're not comfortable with those, but if you are comfortable, definitely try to find opportunities to bring those in. Here's what I would do. Here's what I would do. And as a result of that, we get to bring in some listing language, first of all. Now that might sound a little bit formal to some of you who are used to writing this in task 2 for the essay, but as long as you bring it in at an appropriate time, it can fit perfectly fine in an informal letter as well. So here's what I would do. First of all, now notice what I'm doing here with the grammar as well. Everything is being kept in the conditional future, so using would throughout, because we are not the other person. So this is a hypothetical scenario. If we were in their body, we would do this, okay? And it's also the case that we don't know what they're going to do at the moment, so we're making a prediction and it's maybe not so likely. We don't want to say that it's likely because that's maybe a bit rude. It's like predicting their own future for them. So we usually use would when we're giving advice to other people. So first of all, let's say, find a job as quickly as possible. And for this reason here, it allows you to save. However, I've got this in a listing format, so I just want to write first of all here, and then we keep it nice and informal, just then I'd open a savings account. So like I said, I'm not always going to use the same vocabulary exactly, but essentially this is what I want to do. I'm going to communicate this message. And this is a bit better because it's a little bit less common vocabulary. It shows your understanding of compound nouns. Savings account. I'd open a savings account and deposit a little bit every month. Yeah, let's write exactly that. Maybe at least a little bit every month. Okay, now we've got that save for college. We want to do that. So again, we'll bring in another conditional. However, this time, we're going to mix it up. What am I doing here? What conditional am I in? Hopefully you realize that I've moved from that second conditional to the first conditional. So we've got that present simple followed by the subject and a will or a won't if it's negative, and the rest of the sentence, and the verb in this case. you'll be able to work. If you do this, you'll be able to work. Now we're moving from the second conditional to the first conditional here because we're trying to present the great opportunity that the other person has. So we want to emphasize that it's a real possibility. We want to emphasize this is a great thing that they can have. So we're going to divert from the earlier second conditional and a bit more caution that we put forward there to something that's great and we want to emphasize it's a good thing. So if you do this, you'll be able to work towards affording college, let's say without the financial stress, maybe the financial pressure that, now this is going to be a little bit complex, see if you can follow this along, that would come with it if you went this year. Okay, now let's pause for a moment because that's obviously a little bit tricky. We've just opened the sentence with that first conditional. If you do this, you'll be able to, which we did because we wanted to emphasize it's a possibility that they can have. But we've moved back to the second conditional here because we want to emphasize that maybe they shouldn't do this. Like this is bad, so hopefully they won't do it. And if they won't do it, it's not real. It's not a real possibility. So it becomes a hypothetical again. Hopefully that makes sense. So this they think is going to happen. It's a real possibility. It's a great thing. Whereas this, we don't want them to do it. So we're suggesting that they shouldn't do it. If they don't do it, it's not real. If it's not real, it's hypothetical. And therefore, we use the second conditional. If you still want a little bit of help with that, as that is a little bit difficult to follow, please do ask in the Q&A and I'll see if I can help you out there. Okay, anyway, I think that's good there. We've definitely talked about why getting a job is a good idea. Now we can move on into the final main paragraph, looking at that third bullet point directive, suggesting types of job. And I want to make a clear transition here. So if we think back to that lecture on cohesive devices and introducing a point, maybe separate from the other points, and it's an informal way of doing it, we can use this as for. As for this point, da 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 da. Okay, so in this case, as for what kind of job to take, comma, and then you give some advice. And I want to add a little bit more here. I want to suggest that we know her, as we say we like the outdoors. As for what kind of job to take, knowing you and your love of the outdoors, so we're just introducing here. We've got two sections to introduce, and then we finish with the main independent clause. I'd recommend, again notice the contraction, I would recommend something, as we can put here, in agriculture or conservation. I put the sports over here, but I want to separate it into a different sentence, just so that the paragraph doesn't look a little bit too slim with just a single sentence. So I'm going to add this one here, maybe even sports coaching, and do you remember this bit of punctuation? Ellipses here, ellipsis. So we're adding this on the end because we're putting the idea in the recipient's head. Maybe they can sort of finish the thought for themselves, maybe even sports coaching, and then it's like you look into the distance kind of thing and stroke your chin. If you imagine someone doing that, then you can imagine adding ellipsis. So maybe even sports coaching. And as I said, maybe we can mention that they did a course. So you did take that 2-week course after all. Maybe even a exclamation mark here, but I wouldn't want to overdo them. We've already added 2, so we'll just end it with a full stop there. Maybe even sports coaching. You did take that 2-week course after all. Notice that very conversational vibe coming through here. That's exactly what you should be aiming for when you write an informal letter. Very conversational style of writing. Okay, now we can finish off with that final sentence that just closes things off. We've talked about a few things here. Maybe the other person would like to talk it through a little bit more, so we'll kind of mention that for them. Anyway, so we've talked about what we wanted to talk about. We just want to remind them that we're still here for them. So anyway, if you want to talk it through, notice all these conditionals. This happens a lot in advice letters. Don't worry about using too many conditionals. It's very natural to use them in advice letters. If you want to talk it through in person, comma, remember that comma, always with the conditionals if you have the clauses in this order. If you want to talk it through in person, just let me know. It's always a great phrase to bring into an informal letter, just let me know. You can start a sentence like it, just let me know if you want to talk. You can end a sentence like it. If you want to talk, just let me know. Just let me know. Always happy to hear from you. Again, notice that omission of the first person pronoun. Not I'm always happy, but always happy. Always happy to hear from you. We understand that first person pronoun has been omitted. Again, typical for an informal letter. If we have a quick look at the word count here, 183. Now that, and we'll end it with just a best, and then just my first name. You don't need anything else there 'cause in an informal letter. You might argue that's a little bit on the long side there, 184 words. There's certainly parts of it that we could probably remove. Maybe this last part here. You might even be able to take out this part here. But if you are confident about the speed of your writing, there's no reason why you can't fluff it up a little bit and just make it a little bit more elaborate in places, show off your vocabulary and your grammatical range. Okay, so that covers the informal letter. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what kind of things you should include if you want to be scoring a band 7 or above. This right here, just for the record, is written to a band 9 standard. But yes, if you have any questions about the letter, as always, get in touch via the Q&A function. Otherwise, I will see you in the next lecture.